I'd like to propose that you're stuck in a box. That box is not helpful, will not serve you. And in fact, lots of people have talked about that box for a long time. But you don't need to be stuck in the box. There's actually a whole different thing here, which, by the way, isn't a box. Like, there's no edges to it. And the point is, yeah, when you've lived your whole life stuck in a box, infinite space has a bit of a felt sense of what's that called when you're feeling dizzy, like when you're vertigo, right? It has a felt sense of vertigo. But that's okay. Like, you can actually, it's possible to navigate and orient and to get really good at like flying through infinite space, and it's more fun. And by the way, better maps to reality, so therefore it's also more likely to not kill you and everybody else. And so let me hit on that last piece. It's funny. This is actually kind of a cool. There's all kinds of so many different ways to kind of come into this thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mentioned earlier that in my personal life, a lot of the conversations that I have that are of this sort come from a particular subclass. And a big part of that subclass is what you might call the rationalist community. And in that rationalist community, particularly folks who work on things like computation, computers, computer science, and particularly folks who work on AI. And that, I think, is a place where the ethical and the metaphysical actually get very interesting, because the proposition is something like, it's funny, it's Russell Whitehead. If you try to run the AI project through the Cartesian model of rationality, through the algorithmic model of rationality, two things are going to happen. One is, ultimately you will fail for the reasons that we've just described. But in the meantime, you might actually do a lot of harm. And that's something to be wary of, right? Because it's the master and his emissary problem. The reality is that we can actually subordinate our choice-making infrastructure to a strictly algorithmic rationality. Oh, wow. Okay, let me really settle in this one, because we're seeing a lot of this these days. And I'm going to raise a particular character. His name's Bill Gates, right? I will propose. I don't know Bill Gates personally at all. So what I'm going to propose is I'm definitely proposing a character who I am projecting maps to the real human Bill Gates, and I'm probably wrong. But there's a kind of a algorithmic, logical emissary taking itself as the master, almost like managerial in the actuarial or accounting sense, that character plays. And technocrat, there you go, the technocrat. To the degree to which we subordinate our choice making, our ethics, to that character in our own selves or in our larger collective extended selves, we will in fact be making less effective choices. Because our ratio, our rationality is much larger than that narrow piece. If we subordinate that larger to the smaller, the nanosecond that what we're dealing with is outside of the scope of what that smaller is appropriate to deal with, we're making bad choices, right? And there's lots and lots and lots of that. Like, this is the metaphor here, for example. A metaphor was that discovery in the 80s of the beginning of complex science, complex system science, and nonlinear dynamics, and kind of like the old hand to the forehead of, oh shit, yeah, I totally forgot. And Newton nailed it. Calculus and Leibniz and linear equations were super useful. They're so useful that we reduced all of science and all of our scientific work to that subset of reality that linear equations could map really effectively. Oh wait, but we forgot. It's only about like that much of reality. All the rest of reality, which is all the most important stuff, or most of the most important stuff, is strictly nonlinear. And so those linear equations would never have worked. But because the tool was so damn effective, we kind of got myopic. And maybe that's very similar to your notion of bullshit. We bullshitted ourselves away from being in that relationship with reality. So this intrinsic intermixing, like this recognition that the bullshitting yourself, and particularly the seduction of modernity, of getting suckered into taking the emissary as the master, taking strictly logical, computational, algorithmic rationality as the whole of rationality, is it's punching yourself in the face. It gets advantages. It has optimization capacities. It'll actually always win short-term fights because it can optimize for the finite domain of the domain of the short term that you're identifying. but it will always lose, oftentimes catastrophically for everyone involved, in the long term, right? Yep. Because its errors continue to build, but its mania for maintaining its integrity continues to build, right? The whole bullshit conundrum. Yeah. And then you have to go through some sort of one of these horrible moments of clarity, hit rock bottom moments to shake your psychology out of that. And so anchoring at the ethical, right, which is what you did, right? You anchored rationality at the ethical. Right? It's a disposition and a practice of maintaining a capacity of integrity and conformity with reality, superseding anything that is optimizing, anything that will be locally effective, but at the cost of reducing global effectiveness, is the basis of rationality. It's that, what's the phrase? You taught me this term, by the way, and I can never remember it. Neurology, the brain going back and forth, this thing.
Self-organizing criticality?
No, the reboot, like the process where the brain actually. Nope.
Yeah. Okay, which one?
It's not model-free methods. It's the how funny. It's like this term has identified itself as the word that I always forget to say. I talked with Schmachterberger about this yesterday, and he named it. Anyway, I'll just have to use the description, but it's that notion of like there's a process of the network becoming optimized for a particular domain, and then there has to be a more fundamental mechanism, like a tripwire that pops and says, okay, go back to base, like go all the way back to sort of equilibrium and poise, and then come back, like a cycle that has that as the basis.
So, sorry, I'll give you a moment because you seem to be contemplating something.
Yeah, no, actually, I think the right thing is, it feels like right now there's something that you're holding, that when you bring it back in, I actually can feel like there's a space here and there's a thing here, and this thing here ain't mine. And so until that's in place, I'm just kind of holding, saying, okay, when's that insight?
Well, I had a lot to there's a lot in there. It was so rich. So I think there's also a place we could start was at the beginning where you talked about the two projects. The one is, what does rationality mean, and also persuading other people. And it actually goes into this, because what we're talking about now, and this is to undermine another one of, it's not even a Cartesian thing, it goes back to Occam. You see, with Occam, you get this move where you don't have to go through any fundamental transformation in order to get the ultimate truths. Right? Right? Okay. And so if we put that notion that the universe demands transformation from us, with the notion of the cultivation of virtue, we've seen it now, rationality sort of located in these two things: the transformation of character and the corresponding transformation of communitas. Because those, of course, and that was Aristotle's point, we're inherently political animals. Those two are bound together and necessary. In fact, I become more reflective on myself through dialogue with you. There's increasing evidence that reasoning works best in distributed cognition. So when I'm talking about transformation of character and communitas, I mean that whole thing. And that's where virtue actually sits, right? And then I was thinking, well, the way to persuade people, the Socratic way to persuade them, isn't to go in and try and just defend or refute. The way to do it is to actually undergo the transformation of character and communitas in a way that makes beautiful a new way of being for people, so that they are drawn to it through love, rather than trying to persuade them that, right? So you get drawn into a new paradigm, not because somebody's destroyed the old paradigm. You get drawn into a new paradigm because it's got some beauty to it that wasn't available in the previous paradigm. At least that's one reading of Kuhn that I think is
right. And another way of saying that is that it awakens in you the broader, larger, richer rationality that has always been there.
Yes,
right? It rekindles that and kind of seduces awake or springtimes the winter of your soul. Yeah. And by the pulling of that, you then are brought into it.
That's wonderful. I love that. It springtimes the winter of your soul. That's really good. I like that. It's really wonderful.